Session 4. Managing and leading a project always involves leading and managing a project team, and so in this session we're going to look at the nature of teamwork and how to create a successful project team.
Project Management Session 4, Introduction. Well, project management invariably means working together in a team, and so in this session we will take a look at team working in practical terms. Slide 2. The differences between a team and a group. There's a number of differences between a team and a group, and it's worth considering these to start off our look at team working. Now, we seldom talk about a project group, we invariably talk about a project team, so there does seem to be some sort of difference. Firstly, teams tend to be associated with performance, whereas groups are often associated with interest. The level of commitment is often very different with a team than with a group, and that's an issue that project leaders need to take very seriously. A team needs both a sense of urgency and a high level of skill in order to be effective. As an example, think about the team in the pit of a motor racing circuit. During a pit stop, the vehicle is filled with fuel and wheels are often changed in a very, very small period of time. Sometimes just a few seconds, it seems. Every team member knows their role and there is very little ambiguity in the task. And with a team, the kick-off and the initial meetings are very important in terms of setting the tone of the work, and the rules of engagement tend to be much more rigid and formal than with a group. Teams need to gain quick wins to maintain their sense of urgency, and they need to be constantly challenged with new ideas, facts, information. Timescales to create outcomes are generally shorter than with groups, and feedback on performance is an important factor in promoting effective effort on the part of the team members. So, before moving on, give some thought to the study questions. Would you say you work in a team, or is it simply a group? What differences would you propose to differentiate between a team and a group? In slide 3, we look at the nature of the effective team. There are many writers on the subject of team working. However, most models of what constitutes an effective team boil down to a relatively small set of characteristics which the project leader can focus upon. For our purposes, we will consider 5 important characteristics of an effective team. Firstly, the team has clear goals, a strong sense of direction and effective leadership. Secondly, the team members are clear about their roles and responsibilities and the skill set they need to possess. And this is an important issue in terms of developing each member of the team in the skills that they require. The third issue is the climate or atmosphere in the team and the quality of the interpersonal relationships within the team. People do tend to work more effectively when they're happy, and so an important part of the project leader's role is to make the team a good place to be. Fourthly, methods and operating procedures need to be unambiguous and clear to all concerned to avoid misunderstanding. And finally, the first 4 factors are brought together and linked by effective communication, a fundamentally important aspect of an effective team. So, let's think of the study questions. How would you respond to these questions? How effective is the team of which you are part or which you lead at the present time? Do you have clear goals and a sense of direction? Are the roles and responsibilities of the team members clearly spelt out? What is the atmosphere in the team? Do the operating procedures help or hinder progress? Is there any scope for improving the communications within the team, and, if so, what action should you take? Slide 4. The discipline of teams. One of the most notable writers on teams is John Katzenbach. In his Harvard Business Review article, co-authored with Douglas K. Smith on the topic of the discipline of teams, and in their book The Wisdom of Teams, a number of interesting issues are presented on the subjects of team working which are relevant to the project situation. In both works, the differences between a team and a group are covered in some detail. The team presents itself as having a strong sense of purpose and commitment with clearly identified performance goals. The team members must have complementary skills as opposed to simply a shared interest. There's a high degree of mutual accountability. Katzenbach and Smith also point out that there are different types of teams. There are teams that recommend courses of action, teams that make or do things, and teams that run things. So, just giving some thought to the study questions, which of the three types of teams, recommending, making or running, do you work with? What is the level of mutual accountability in those teams? To what extent does each team possess complementary skills? Slide 5. Another key figure in the world of teams and team working is Meredith Belbin, who created the concept of team roles. Belbin's team roles originated with some work he undertook with engineering project teams whilst he was at the Henley Administrative College. The basic idea is that as well as a professional role in a team, individuals have preferences to play team roles when working in a team with others. Some people like to be creative and contribute ideas, and we call this the plant role. Others like to link the team with its organisation and context generally, and this is called the resource investigator role. Resource investigators pride themselves in having contacts and being able to access resources to help the team make progress. The coordinator was originally called the chairman, but this tended to imply more in the way of command and control than was desired, and it was also politically incorrect in terms of its masculine nature. So the shaper likes to set the direction of the team, the monitor evaluator tends to focus on the outputs and the quality of the team. The implementer enjoys putting ideas into action, and the completer, sometimes called the completer finisher, likes to see tasks completed and finalized. Belbin's original work mentioned only the first 8 roles in the slide. However, with increasing complexity being a feature of most teams, he increased the roles by an extra role, the 9th role, the specialist, who might be a part-time member of the team or involved as and when appropriate. Belbin argues that an effective team will contain a balanced mix of all of these roles. With a small team of say 4 or 5, then each individual needs to contribute 2 roles to ensure that the team is balanced. So let's think about the study questions and how you would answer them. Which team role most closely reflects your preference in a team working situation? Does the team in which you are currently working have individuals who cover all 9 of Belbin's team roles? Which role is the least identifiable in your team? Slide 6. Now let's look at some of the basic team building blocks. We can see that teams are a little more complex than they would first appear. And if we pull together some of the ideas so far that we've looked at, we can create a set of team building blocks which will enable us to create and develop an effective team. Firstly, using Belbin's work, we need a balanced set of role preferences within the team. There needs to be clear objectives and agreed goals. Interpersonal issues of openness, confrontation, support and trust need to be handled effectively, and there needs to be a set of sound operating procedures as regards the way the team members work together. Appropriate leadership is important, together with a regular review of the team's progress. Individuals need development in terms of their skill sets within the team, and the team needs to relate well to the rest of the organisation and its other stakeholders. Finally, the communication processes need to be effective both within the team and between the team and its organisational and external stakeholders. So, the study questions for this particular slide are these. How effective is your team in terms of the 11 building blocks shown in the slide? How would you describe your team's strengths? What are its areas for development? In slide 7, we move on to some of the ideas involved in developing the project team. Now, teams tend to have associated with them a level of maturity, and this isn't related to the ages of the team members or the team itself, but to the common experiences that the team has had together. It's possible to have an immature team that's worked together for many years, and at the same time it's possible to mature a team relatively quickly by common experience, particularly if that experience is in some way demanding or stressful. Teams do seem to pass through a number of stages, and Tuckman is credited with identifying these stages. Firstly, there is the forming stage, where the team members come together but do not yet know each other. Team members tend to be polite, somewhat guarded, dependent on the leader, and see themselves very much as individuals, because the team spirit has not yet been formed. The team then seems to move into the storming phase, where conflicts start to occur, hidden agendas emerge, and there tends to be a lack of listening. And in this storming phase, the team sometimes splits into cliques, each with their own agenda. Once this phase is passed through, the team then settles down into the norming phase, where procedures are developed, leadership is shared, creativity improves, and cliques tend to dissolve. The final stage is the performing stage, where the team is resourceful, creative, flexible, and effective. Group morale is high, and individuals seem to develop empathy towards each other. They start to see how each other feels about things. Now, the performing phase is not the end of the story for a team. If a new member joins the team, then a reforming stage may occur, which may cycle the whole team through the forming, storming, norming cycle. When the team is disbanded at the end of a project, there may also be an adjourning phase, where people find new working relationships, and in some cases this may result in a mourning phase, where individual team members may feel sad or even depressed that the team is no longer in existence. So before moving on to the next slide, just give some thought to the study questions. At which stage is your team in at the current moment in time? Are they in the forming, storming, norming, or performing stage? Would it be worth injecting a storming phase in some way to stimulate the team and move it towards more effective performance? How will you handle the situation with a new member joining the team? And then finally, what steps can you take to make the disbandment of the team less painful? So just give some thought to those study questions before moving on to the next slide. In slide 8, we return to the work of Katzenbach and Smith. Now, returning to this work, the next stage in team development once the team is in the performing phase is to build on that performance level, hopefully to create a high-performance team. And there are a number of steps the project leaders and managers can take to actually achieve progress in this area. Establishing a sense of urgency with demanding performance standards is just one area. Selecting team members for their skill and potential skill rather than for personality is important. The way the team starts off is important, and the initial meetings should be punchy and energized. First impressions count a great deal in setting the tone of the work of the team in the future. Clear rules of behaviour are important, together with some quick wins to show success. The team needs to be challenged regularly with new information and facts, and they need to spend quality time working together both in the workplace and in social terms outside work. So before moving on to the next slide, just give some thought to the study questions. What actions can you take to build higher performance from your team? Have you been in a position to select your team members on the basis of their skill level rather than their personality? Have you started off the work of the team in an energetic manner? Have you set clear rules of behaviour? And finally, what action can you take to ensure that the team spends quality time together both on and off the job? So just give some thought to those study questions before moving on to the next slide. Slide 9. Katzenbach and Smith have identified a number of interesting issues relating to teams, which they've termed common sense and uncommon sense findings about teams. In this slide, slide 9, we can see some of their findings in the common sense bracket. Further details of these are given in the article The Discipline of Teams and the book The Wisdom of Teams, listed in the bibliography at the end of this session. The first common sense finding is that a demanding performance challenge tends to create a team rather than just a group. It's important to apply team basics as already discussed in earlier sessions of this module, as they can be overlooked. Team performance opportunities exist in all parts of the organisation, and top teams tend to be the most difficult as the nature of their work tends to be somewhat political and ambiguous in nature. So finally, organisations seem to prefer individual accountability over group accountability. So, having looked then at some of these common sense findings of Katzenbach and Smith, think about how you would answer the study questions. Do you demand high performance levels from your team? Have you considered the team basics mentioned earlier in the centre sessions? Does your organisation focus on individual accountability or on group accountability? Slide 10. Uncommon sense findings about teams. The uncommon sense findings about teams are perhaps even more interesting than the common sense findings. Organisations with strong performance standards seem to create more real teams than organisations that promote teams just because they seem like a good idea intuitively. High performance teams are in reality quite rare. Hierarchy and teams go together almost as well as teams and performance. Effective teams naturally integrate performance and learning. And finally, teams are becoming the primary unit of performance for an increasing number of organisations. So all these common sense and uncommon sense findings are directly related to project teams. So let's think about the study questions. To what extent do the uncommon sense findings about teams relate to your project team? What steps can you take to improve the operation of your project team based on these issues? Just give some thought to those study questions before moving on to the next slide. Not all teams are successful, even project teams. Sometimes barriers exist as regards developing the team into one which is a high-performance team. With part-time project teams, some individual members might have loyalties that rest elsewhere, perhaps with their functional department rather than with the project team. Vague and non-specific goals can cause uncertainty and misunderstanding, and if individuals are in more than one team, there may be conflicts between the various teams to which the individual belongs. Sometimes team members may not trust each other fully. Brainstorming sessions can be very ineffective if ideas and contributions are rubbished by other team members. Sometimes people just lose their motivation for the project team, and cliques may form for their own protection. So before we move on to the next slide, just give some thought to the study questions. Firstly, what issues holds back your project team from becoming a high-performance team? Are your project goals clear to everyone and understood by all the team members? How effective are your brainstorming or idea-generating sessions in terms of encouraging out-of-the-box thinking, rather than just sensible ideas? Just give some thought to those questions before moving on to the next slide. Slide 12. This is the last slide for this session. And in this slide we're going to look at the issues involved in handling a dysfunctional team. Sometimes these barriers to team working that we've already discussed result in a dysfunctional team which doesn't work together effectively and whose outcomes and results are poor. Patrick Lencioni has addressed this issue with his two books, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team and the associated field book. A team needs to be based on trust between the team members, and this is the first priority for the project leader and manager to address. If there is an absence of trust, then members will promote themselves as being invulnerable, not bring problems to light in the team meetings, to avoid exposing themselves and putting themselves at risk from the other team members. The next stage to enable a team to move from dysfunctional to functional is to ensure that conflicts are aired in the team and that people speak their minds. If people operate in fear of conflict in the team, then artificial harmony tends to result, and the real meetings take place after the official ones. Thirdly, the team needs to be committed to a set of clear goals to avoid ambiguity and problems with prioritization. Team members need to be made accountable for performance standards, or else those standards will tend to be eroded. Finally, the focus of the team needs to be on team outputs rather than individual star performances. If the team does focus on team outputs, then issues of status and ego tend not to arise and cause problems. So, to finish off this session, give some thought to the study questions. How would you rate your team on these 5 levels? Which of the levels requires addressing to improve the performance of your team? Does the team really operate as a team, or do individuals tend to follow their own agendas? That's the end of session 4. Let's just look briefly at the bibliography in slide 13. In slide 13 we see the bibliography, and there are a number of really good books on teams that are relevant to project working. The books by Meredith Belbin, Management Teams, Why They Succeed or Fail, published in 1981, is still valid, and then Team Roles at Work in 1993, very useful. Patrick Lencioni's 2 books, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team and Overcoming the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, 2002 and then 2005, very relevant to handling a dysfunctional project team. And then Katzenbach and Smith's work, The Discipline of Teams and the Wisdoms of Teams, both very, very useful book. So if you get a chance to read through those books and the articles and have a look at things, it'll definitely increase your overall view of what project teams are all about. Thank you.